December the 11th, 1939, we went down to the Federal Building in Detroit and joined the U.S. Army Air Corps.
When that Pearl Harbor hit, everybody in our unit over across the street was listening very carefully, and a whole bunch of them got excited and they thought they'd start enlisting and so on. But I was in ROTC and I said, I'm going to stay as long as they'll let me.
I happened to be on a basketball team at Western, and the 5 of us went down and volunteered to join the Army Air Corps.
I said to my mother, well, I'm going to get drafted, so I may as well go in. Should I go, what branch should I go in? She says, well, from all that I've heard, they have good food in the Navy. She said,
well, I was drafted May 13th in 1943.
10 of us in the class went immediately overseas. And I mean immediately upon graduation. And we had 247 hours total flying time at that time. We also didn't know what plane we were going to fly until we got overseas.
And they trained me on all the weapons that the Army had, which was to save my life, really, as far as that goes, because I used most of them.
They rush you through quartermaster school. I had learned the Morse code. I knew the semaphore, A, B, C, D, and the lights, but I was real slow. It's a wonder we didn't get blown out of the water.
We went to the South Pacific, and our tanks went to Europe.
Actually, I left here in March of '43, and we were on board a transport for 28 days going to Italy.
Then we were bombed at midnight on it was the 7th there, and about 2.5 or 3 hours after that bombing, we heard that Pearl Harbor was being bombed.
At about 7:30 or after, I woke to the sound of gunfire, machine guns and bombs dropping. Thought, what a hell of a time for gunnery practice. Then heard the planes and decided it was an alert of the best kind. Sure enough, there were, how many? 50 planes in the air, and definitely zooming and attacking Wheeler. They were so low we could see the red suns on their wings. Standing there like goops, we suddenly realized a couple of planes were heading for us, very low, strafing the road. I can't say we properly dove flat for cover, but we got out of the way in the bushes very quickly.
We didn't have any anti-aircraft equipment on the field. We were sending off the airplanes as fast as we could, and some of them were shot up while they're trying to take off. We were bombed and strafed almost every day from December it was really December the 8th in the Philippines until we left there on Christmas Eve.
Finch Haven, New Guinea was where my squadron was based, and that's where I began and where I learned that I was going to fly a C-47. The type of mission that our squadron carried out was to carry troops from place to place, sometimes casualties, sometimes paratroopers, sometimes equipment that was needed in a special place. Most of the time we slept under the wing of the plane because we take off from Finch and we may be gone 4 or 5 days.
And when we got into Napoli, there were so many ship spars sticking up out of the water, we had to hardly maneuver in because they just shot the daylights out of that place. And so I was in charge of training 10,000 guys there to get ready to go into combat. That was the first assignment.
We sailed out of a ship, Finch Haven, in New Guinea. And they said, well, we're transferring from this ship to that one. Well, you can imagine 2 big ships back and forth, out there in the water. We had to get a hold of the ropes and climb ourselves up with our bags and guns.
The invasion of Okinawa was the next thing I remember. In fact, we were there 3 days before the infantry went in. because that's when we went in with the rocket launchers. For about 5 or 10 minutes, they said we had the firing power of a battleship, but only for about 5 or 10 minutes after all the rocket launchers went off.
That's when the fighting started. And from there on, why, it was a battle every night. I mean, you see whether you or the Japanese survived.
The air bases we would land at would be places where they make an invasion, scrape out a airstrip, and that would be where we'd land.
We were loaded on a ship. They thought we were going to go to Hawaii or to Guam or to Australia or someplace. And they took us all the way across Manila Bay and dumped us out at Marvelis on Bataan. We were then given 15 minutes instruction in infantry tactics. We were each given 2 bandoliers of corroded ammunition and a 1903 Springfield rifle. And we crawled on our bellies through that jungle until we got in sight of this machine gun up on a bamboo ramp. And we sent them to their eternal rest.
Next assignment was when they decided I was going to be a replacement, so they sent me up to Anzio. And Anzio was ready to break out of there. So we took Rome. We took that biggest of all artillery items that ever had been built, as far as I know. It was on 2 railroad cars, and they'd roll it out of the caves, fire 1 round or 2 into Anzio, and if they hit a Liberty ship, it would go down just like nothing.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf was an unbelievable experience. That was one of the largest battles in the history of warfare. And the planes were all flying around trying to get into the Strip. The Strip was overloaded. People were saying, I'm running low on gas, I got to get in. So you'd land between all these planes. Pretty hairy situation. We had radio compass. We didn't have radar. We didn't have Loran. What an island looks like, they got an island, and the 9/10 of the island is the Strip. And in this one instance, we were taking off from Leyte, the same place where Amelia Earhart took off from. And took off and got about maybe 100, 150 feet off the ground and lost an engine. And we had to come back and just above stalling speed with that one engine, full power on the throttles, come back and land.
My commanding officer said, I want you to go up there and see if the Germans are in that tower. If they are, we're going to blow it down. And so I took a squad and we went up, and we laid and looked at it for a long period of time, no movement whatsoever. So I went back and reported them. I said, I think they've left. So we didn't blow it down. And thank goodness that Tower of Pisa would have been gone. Livergnano, the guys all called it liver and onions, typical of GIs. That's for the heaviest defense that the Germans put out anytime in the war, anywhere, because they knew if we ever got through there, we were headed for Berlin. Just about dusk, I heard the engine start up of a big tank, and I knew it was either a Panther or a Mark 6. And it backed out of a destroyed building. That's why I hadn't seen it. Backed out of there, and it just started pounding our building. I'm the last one in the building. I get to the 3rd floor, and there are no stairs. The tank had shot them all away, so I said, okay, I got to get out here some way. So I jumped out the window, and that's when I tore myself up pretty bad. And when I landed on the ground below, the tank saw me, and he pulled around with his machine gun, and he had tracers in it, and it was dusk already, so they were just coming off of the rocks all around me, and I was running like you couldn't believe on a broken leg. And
in the morning of April 9th, they called us at 8 o'clock and said that the Bataan forces were going to surrender. Next morning, the infamous march started on April the 10th. As time progressed over the next 4 days and 5 days and 4 nights, They, many of the guys that had dysentery would stop to relieve themselves, and that would be their last move. They were either clubbed to death with rifle butts, or used for bayonet practice, or just out and out shot. You never knew from one day to the next when the axe was going to fall.
3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon, screaming and hollering up the hill, they came after us. Well, we had our machine gun set here and my machine gun here, and I just opened the thing up and let it go, and they opened up that there, we drove them back. And here they are down there, we could see them down there, you know. And we'd throw hand grenades down, they'd throw them back to us. I had one kid was with me, was one of the machine gunners with me, and his name was Rodriguez. He stuck his head up over this rut, and they hit him right through the head right there, and his helmet flew in it. And then now here I am alone, and I'm up here with my machine gun. Well, they shot the panel off my machine gun. It hit me. I got a little bit of spot on. That's where it's steel on my forehead. But I didn't think I'd ever come home. Many times I'll be there.
We had one great loss that I have failed to mention. Lieutenant Elmer Harris, good friend and fellow company officer, was badly wounded. I sent 8 men with him to take turns carrying the litter. When they returned, I found their hands bleeding and blistered and almost raw. Testimony, I thought, to their sense of duty, the roughness of the ordeal, and their caring for this man.
After we got through with the Leyte campaign, we went to the Philippines. And on our way into the Lingayen Gulf, our ship, the Kamikazes, got after us.
The Kamikazes. I don't think people realized what a nightmare this kamikaze thing was.
And I remember we shot 2 of them down because it was after us. I mean, I could see them coming. They had we had some good guys on that ship with the machine guns. They got them before they hit us, as far as that goes.
You had no idea whether you were going to be next, or whether, with all the bullets, all the flak hitting them, whether they could get the desired big ship. They'll take anything rather than go into the water. This was a nightmare for me, and I still have recurrences of this.
What did I think about? Our minds were absolutely obsessed with the thought of food. We dreamed about food, we talked about food, we concocted all kinds of things that we were going to do when we got where we could get food. We made up recipes of things. We'd spend a half an hour or an hour, or maybe 2 hours on the intricacies of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You can spend a couple hours talking about that. You know what we talked about. You dreamed about food. You could get a pie. You could get it out of the dish onto your plate. You could cut it with a fork, but you couldn't get it to your mouth. You could have a milkshake. You could put a straw in it, put a straw in your mouth. You couldn't get that sucker up the straw to save you. Oh, I kept a record in a little book that I have in my pocket. These are things that various guys talked about, that they were telling how good it was, you know, so we'd write it down and then read it over and read it over and read it over, thinking about the various kinds of things. In the back here I have my weights. The only one that's accurate is the one that's 70 pounds when I was so dehydrated from not being able to eat or drink anything, and that was an accurate weight.
I felt good about going in at that time. I thought it was the thing to do.
The attitude of people was, we're going to get together, we're going to win this war. It's hard to describe unless you live through it. But I think that was, what I said about myself, you could say was true of most of the people that I knew.
If you had a son, you put a star, a flag in the window, and I know my parents were so proud. I mean, there weren't many families that had 4 stars on there.
Today's world is so different, and yet I don't think they have any understanding of the sacrifices made to make this world. And they're complaining every day about a soldier being killed overnight in Iraq. We had 400 a day killed in our unit, and all for the same reason.
I mean, the sacrifices that were made in previous wars, the crosses in the cemeteries in France, the thousands of Americans that died to preserve what we in America take for granted. I think it's important that they know war is not fun, war is hell. But there's a price to pay, and sacrifices were made, and I think it's very important that they understand.
But the spirit of wanting to do something and do your duty was incredible, at least in little old Wyandotte.
And I wouldn't trade 1 foot of this country for all the South Pacific there is, I'll tell you.
There are a lot of unsung heroes, and I never considered myself a hero. I felt I did my duty, but the heroes are, and there's an awful lot of them that are still over there. They're the real heroes.